Archie.
Samson Mow, welcome, man. I really appreciate you coming down and meeting us in Prague. You've been here before?
Yeah, one time.
Now I remember. I met you in Rocamato, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't remember.
You don't remember well.
Probably jet lag.
And I was undoxed at that stage, and as we were walking out, I think I was with Carla and Walker, and we were walking out, and I saw you, and I just sort of leaned in at the last minute, say, "Hey, I'm Archie," and you just looked at me with a look of sort of confusion, like, am I supposed to know you? Yeah. Like, no, I run Bitcoin Archive. And yeah, you were right. You weren't rude about it, and I understand if people don't know who I am. Like, not everybody's thinking of Bitcoin Archive as front of mind like I do, but I remember that. And man, people go wild at that event, I think.
Looking for a secure, trusted way to buy, sell, and hold Bitcoin? Gemini has been leading the way since 2014. Founded by the Winklevoss twins to be a security-first, fully regulated Bitcoin platform. With Gemini, your Bitcoin is protected with enterprise-grade security, backed by insurance and Type 2 certifications for SOC 1 and SOC 2. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or a long-time hodler, Gemini gives you the tools to stack sats and build generational wealth your way. From simple one-tap buys to advanced charts and trading features, it's all here. Buy, sell, and hold securely. That's Gemini. Gemini. Bitcoin with confidence. Need cash without selling your Bitcoin? With DeBiFi, you borrow against your Bitcoin, non-custodial, multi-sig escrow, and you keep your keys. No banks, no selling. Just institutional grade liquidity with terms up to 2 years and APRs as low as 9%. All transactions are signed using private keys on your own device. Using a 3 of 4 multi-sig setup, 3 out of 4 keys must approve every transaction, giving you control, transparency, and peace of mind. Whether you're a hodler, miner, small business, or treasury team, DeBiFi gives you the cash you need now without giving up your Bitcoin upside or triggering a taxable event. Get liquidity, keep exposure, and stay secure. That's DeBiFi. DeBiFi, your Bitcoin, your money.
Let's talk about Gen 3. Tell us about Gen 3, because that's a company that you started up, what was it, 2.5 years ago now?
So Gen 3 is just a Bitcoin tech company, but we also focus on trying to get more countries to adopt Bitcoin. So trying to advocate for nation-state Bitcoin adoption. We've engaged with a number of countries around the world, and we're kind of educators. And one way you can look at it is we're giving politicians and regulators like a one-on-one face-to-face podcast, just delivering Bitcoin insight and answering their questions and seeing if they can find a way to adopt Bitcoin in their country. And we also build the Aqua Wallet, which is a Bitcoin super app. It's a liquid-based wallet, but you can transact over Lightning and also over different stablecoins through swaps too. So it's meant to be a wallet for Latin America, where things like Tether are very dominant and everyone's using that. And our hope is that we can convert some of the Tether users into becoming Bitcoin users.
So you can do Bitcoin over the Bitcoin network, Bitcoin over the Lightning network.
Yep.
And then tell us about the stables as well.
Yeah, so it's a liquid-based wallet. So we support liquid USDT, which recently increased. I think the previous issuance was like 30-something million. 36 million. And now it's almost at 100 million as of like 2 days ago, because there's increased demand for liquid USDT. But within Aqua, you can swap from other chains like Tron and Ethereum, Tether, or whatever, into liquid Tether, and then out from liquid Tether back onto those other chains. So as somebody in Latin America that wants Tether, that you can just use Aqua and send and receive, and then swap to Bitcoin. So it's like the first Bitcoin wallet that is natively supporting stablecoins.
And the liquid aspect of it, can you tell us a little bit about liquid and which parts of the wallet that supports or engages with?
Yeah, so Liquid is a Bitcoin sidechain launched by Blockstream. And there's something like 70 or 80 federation members now. And actually, I was one of the first to join the Liquid network. Back when it was being launched, I was at BTC China. I was a COO. It's one of the biggest exchanges in the world. And I think I signed on Kraken signed on, and Bitfinex, and a number of other big exchanges. But it's just a Bitcoin sidechain. So it's like a layer 2. And you can peg Bitcoin into Liquid and then peg it back out. And it's got 1-minute block times, confidential transactions, and allows for issuing of assets. And that is what Tether did. So they issued Tether on the Liquid network. So it's a native part of the network. And you can have atomic swaps between Liquid Bitcoin and Tether or other Liquid assets. There's also Euro stablecoin from SideSwap. There's a Brazilian one called DPix and a Mexican stablecoin called Mexis. So all of these live on Liquid network, and you can do atomic swaps between all these different assets. So what we do is we allow you to swap out with other chains as well. So it's I think it's really the first Bitcoin wallet that's focused on the stablecoin use case in addition to Bitcoin. So you can move vertically through the Bitcoin stack, through Bitcoin main chain to Liquid to Lightning, but then also across the different layers into stables too.
That's fascinating. Okay.
Our biggest user base is actually in Argentina. So
what's motivating them?
I think it's just the stablecoin aspect.
Right.
We also have a fair amount of usage in Brazil too. So I guess our main market is Latin America.
Through Tether, that's coming into Aqua Wallet as well.
They're looking to use stablecoins, and Liquid is not that well known because there hasn't been a wallet that's been super accessible and usable until Aqua. But now that it is getting more well known, people are understanding that Liquid Tether is actually superior to other chains because it's cheaper. Tron Tether transactions are now at, I think, $2 a transaction, and it's becoming very expensive, right?
Regardless of the size.
Regardless of the size. Just the cost of the gas fee of Tron has went up. But Liquid USDT transactions are like 2 or 3 cents. So it's very fast and very cheap. Plus, the nature of the confidential transactions means that people can't see your account balance. Whereas if you're transacting on Tron or Ethereum, it's account-based, not UTXO-based. So if you send me some Tron Tether, I can trace it back and see your total balance. And my friend Rossello, he runs a SmartPay out of Brazil. He was saying that this is actually an attack vector because if you're in Latin America and your cousin is doing some shady stuff, he can now see my balance because he knows that you transacted with me and look it up. It's all public. So maybe some people are discovering that, or they're using Aqua to kind of shield their balance by keeping their Tether in Liquid USDT and then sending out over the swap to Tron what people want.
So if I pay anybody with Bitcoin, is that feature also available to me through a Bitcoin payment using Aqua?
Yeah, it supports Bitcoin.
So I can send Bitcoin to my Aqua wallet.
Yeah.
And then through there, say, pay my producer with his Bitcoin, right? Through Liquid.
Yeah, you can swap it to Tether and pay them in Liquid USDT too.
Either way, but I get the same benefit of not having exposed my wallet balance. Is that right?
Yeah, for Bitcoin, it's not as bad because it's UTXO based. So you can, as long as you don't merge all your UTXOs into one and then pay from your 100 BTC balance or 1,000, I don't know. But you can split it off and have like a 0.1 and you pay him half of that or something, right? But for Ethereum and other chains like Tron, it's all account based. So there's just one number, which is your balance, unless you're managing multiple wallets.
Right. Yeah.
So if you send something, they see how much you have in total.
So if you've got a Trezor and you've got multiple wallet addresses, right? I send something from one of those addresses, they can then see everything in that address, right? Not everything in the wallet, but everything in that address. Yeah. In the same scenario with Aqua, that's not the case. If I send something from that one address.
Well, if you're sending it from the layer 2 wallet in Aqua, it's Liquid Bitcoin.
Okay.
So it's confidential. They can't see the amount.
I see.
But there's an unblinding key. So you can send the key to someone. They can see that transaction between you. So if you sent it to your producer, then you can give him the unblinding key and he can see the full transaction.
Yeah, that's really useful because one of the problems at the moment paying, with a balance out of most wallets, I should say, is that you expose everything in that address. And it's like, come on, guys, we need actually an option, right? So that if it is a payment rather than just a transfer or internal sort of juggling of addresses or consolidation of UTXOs, that's fine. But if it's an external transfer, you should have the option, right? Wallets should have an option somehow.
Like I said, it's not that bad with Bitcoin because you have different UTXOs.
It's confined to your wallet address.
Yeah.
Right?
It's confined to a UTXO.
Within a wallet address.
Yeah. Well, within a wallet. So in the wallet, you have different UTXOs and you can pick and choose. But I think the liquid model is easier to use for normal people because you don't have to deal with coin control and picking which UTXO, right? If you're just in liquid Bitcoin, you could have coin control, but it doesn't matter as much because it's all obfuscated. It's all confidential.
I would have thought that would be a hugely in-demand feature for most wallets. That
for most Bitcoiners, they're probably transacting more over Lightning now, and you still get that same privacy, right? If you're using your own Lightning wallet and it's self-hosted, then it's all private because you open the channel. And then once you open the channel, then every transaction over Lightning is kind of disconnected from the original UTXO.
Man, that's amazing. Why did you launch a Bitcoin wallet? Like when I look at the landscape of Bitcoin wallets, I just see so many out there, right? I'm like, even just phone-based wallets, there are so many. Right. Well, what's the business model behind a wallet, and why are there so many out there? Because they don't look all that different to me from a end user perspective. So what's the difference with what Aqua does other than the liquid sidechain aspect?
Well, I think it has to do with what the goal is. I can't speak to other Bitcoin wallets, but for us, the goal is to onboard 1 billion people to Bitcoin, right? I would say in terms of competitiveness, Bitcoin wallets as a whole are far less competitive than, say, altcoin wallets. They do a better job at abstraction of complexity, ease of buying, because they're trying to sell their altcoins to people. So they really focus on making it super easy to buy altcoins. And they also focus on mass market reach, right? Because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to onboard people, sell them the altcoins. And for Bitcoin wallets, it seems like by and large, they're designed for Bitcoiners only. And there's not a big push to make it easy to use or create a wallet that has the killer app capacity where people need to use it, right? And I think for us at Aqua, that's the goal, to create this killer super app that's really sticky for people. So we're trying to focus on a lot of integrations, local integrations in different countries. So for Brazil, we'll have swaps with the Brazilian stablecoin, right? And then we're working to integrate with PixPay. That's like the national payment rail. So it's actually a wallet you would be able to use in your daily life in Brazil. And we're trying to replicate that in all these different countries in Latin America. We have an integration for Mexico coming. We're working on something for Argentina. But it's meant to be this daily use wallet. I think that is how you onboard 1 billion people into Bitcoin. It's not necessarily making a great Lightning wallet, but hooking into all these different things that people need in their daily life, paying bills, sending money to friends and family, converting to stable coins for their region. Just really useful tools any average person would want. But if you look at it, most Bitcoin wallets are really not doing that. They're adding more features for people that are already Bitcoiners, but not so much that people that are not into Bitcoin would need.
Do you think those wallets, Bitcoin wallets, are mostly targeting a particular type of Bitcoiner?
I would say so. Within that market segment, there are a lot of different stratifications that you can get to, right? Like Zeus is a great wallet, but that's more so for people that want to connect to their Lightning node at home and then spend from their own node. We get requests for that too, but I always say just use Zeus, right? It's great at what they do, and we don't want to do everything. And then you have the custodial Lightning wallets like Blink and all those, but I think that's a privacy drawback because when you create your wallet, you have to give up your phone number and they can see everything you're doing and see who you're sending to. So there's not really a benefit, but it is really easy to use, of course. So I think Aqua is meant to be sort of middle ground. It's fully non-custodial. You have your own keys for everything. And we can't really see anything that you're doing with the wallet. So if you're sending a Lightning payment, it's done through a swap provider. If you're sending, doing a swap through Tether, that's another swap provider. But we integrate all these different services, and you're very private because nobody can see everything, the holistic picture of all your actions in the wallet.
You mentioned just a moment ago about, I guess, the advanced feature set of altcoin wallets, for example, right? Why do you think that Bitcoin wallets lagged that? Why aren't they drawing lessons from their examples? Just in regard to user friendliness, ease of use, abstraction of complexity, all those things you mentioned earlier on. Why would that be a barrier for Bitcoin wallets?
Because I think it has to do with the difference in motivation. For altcoin wallets, like let's say Ethereum, right? They really want to sell people Ethereum. They need people to buy Ethereum. So they're really laser focused on making it super easy. Whereas I think for Bitcoiners, we know Bitcoin is better. And we don't focus as much on making it super slick and easy to buy Bitcoin in the wallet. So that's why I think like the altcoin wallets, like even Solana, Ethereum and all that, they are generally better at UX than Bitcoin wallets. There's just not as much of a focus on letting people buy Bitcoin easily.
Is there a conflict between user experience and security?
Yes and no. I think there are things you can simplify, but generally mobile wallets, which Aqua is, are not that secure because it is a hot wallet. It's on your phone, right? You want a offline hardware wallet or air-gapped computer or something for your long-term storage. But I think for spending, it's okay to have a hot wallet on your phone because it's like your wallet that you carry around in your pocket, right? You're okay to carry a couple $100, and if you lose it, it's not the end of your world, right? So it's okay to have that trade-off in security. But I think there are probably things that you can do to make it a lot easier to onboard. Like, for example, Aqua doesn't force you to write down your seed phrase. We have a more nuanced tiered approach where if your wallet is empty, we don't remind you because it's empty. But when you have a balance, then the software detects the balance and it'll trigger a reminder saying, Archie, you should back up your seed phrase. And what we want to do later on is when you hit a threshold, we'll say, Archie, go buy a hardware wallet or buy a metal backup or some more robust mechanism. But I think there are ways you can gradually bring people on to increase their security level based on of their holdings. Because there are wallets that will gatekeep and say you need to back it up first before you do anything. But I think that's the blocker for onboarding people.
That's a really interesting point you made. We were just talking to Mark Moss before about orange pilling and how there's a propensity for people when they're talking to noobs, for example, who might just express a curiosity or maybe even a problem that can be addressed by Bitcoin. And the propensity for Bitcoiners is to just knowledge dump everything from ideology to economics to technical. And it's like, no, actually, you've got to slow down. Yeah. You've got to meet them where they are and just get them to take one step forward towards Bitcoin and then let them digest that and let them take another step forward. So like, I guess so long as you're not really, you've got those steps in place to ramp up the security as their exposure increases, I think that makes a lot of sense because what you want to do is it's kind of like any onboarding process, right? If you ask for someone's name, first name, last name, phone number, email address, every extra field is going to be a barrier for them to completing that adoption onboarding process, right? So I guess it kind of makes sense. It's but how are you finding that working in terms of retention of customers? So it might be like a lot of people are signing up. So from like downloads to balance load, like how are you finding that? Are you I don't want to ask you for specific numbers because that's, commercial in confidence, but like, are you finding that process assisting and improving your onboarding conversion?
Collection of data is something we've talked about. We had an offsite a few months ago. We're probably going to add some opt-in analytics, but right now we don't collect any data whatsoever. So we don't know their usage behavior or anything like that, but we do want to collect opt-in data so we can improve and optimize services that are integrated into the wallet. But right now it's super easy. You download Aqua from the App Store. You can receive assets. You can swap them. All the service providers that we integrate don't require any registration or anything. So right off the bat, you're getting in the door and you can receive and swap without having to do any registration or identify yourself.
What's the business model for a wallet? Because like we know the hardware wallets, they have the upfront purchase, right? And that's an obvious one. But then in the back end, how does a Bitcoin wallet make money, for example? Like what's the business model, or what are the different types of business models available?
So I think for us, it's swaps. So every swap, the swap provider gives us a referral fee and we generate revenue that way. You can also sell Bitcoin either directly or through a partner, and then they'll give you referral fees as well. So it's basically transactions like buying Bitcoin or swapping between Bitcoin and different assets, or generally that's the main business model for most wallets.
Okay, so transaction and swap fees, right? Okay.
Whereas like a Lightning wallet, they charge you for opening a channel. So I think Phoenix wallet takes 1%. So if you want to have a Phoenix wallet, they'll charge you 1% to open a channel.
Now that you touched on that, I guess you'd be a really good person to help me understand what the hell is going on with, was it Block that earned however much percent yield on their Bitcoin through opening a channel, right? Now,
I think it's routing. They're just routing.
Explain that.
So everyone that's running a Lightning node can route payments. I think it's optional. So you can...
Is that different from having a channel open?
Well, you can open a channel and allocate a portion of that channel to routing. So you can not route and just use it yourself, or you can allocate part of your liquidity in the channel to routing payments. And for doing that, you can get paid, some sats per every payment that goes through. Actually, I think it's percentage based for Lightning channels, but don't quote me on that. But that's how Block is making money. So they're one of the larger Lightning nodes, and there's like a lot of very big Lightning nodes. And because they're so well connected with other Lightning nodes, that they can earn a lot of money because everyone wants to connect to the most well-connected nodes. And they're basically like pools of liquidity that are just moving sats back and forth with other big nodes.
So the bigger you are, the more connected you will be. Others will use you because you're a reliable router or a channel. Am I using the right terminology? And so that has a compounding effect. So more people will use it. Okay, that's really interesting. So does that mean that it's not necessarily... anyone can route, but not necessarily everybody's going to generate those kinds of returns?
Probably not. So they're big and they can earn that kind of yield on their Bitcoin because they're that big. But if it's like just you wanting to set up and make that, I don't know. You'd have to invest more capital, be online longer so people know your node is established, because it's sort of like a heartbeat. Like if you've been around for 5 years, like people saying that you're reliable, looking to you. Right?
Yeah, because when I heard Saylor saying maybe a year and a half ago that down the track they will look at ways of generating yield on their Bitcoin, this would seem to me, at least on a global scale, to facilitate sort of global commerce for an organization of scale, shall we say. Like they would be absolutely beautifully positioned for that. I don't know whether or not any channel is going to need $70-80 billion worth of liquidity, but could that be an opportunity for them to generate yield off their Bitcoin and potentially be like a global liquidity hub of Bitcoin earning yield on what is essentially otherwise, at this point, a dormant asset, right?
Post Hyperbitcoinization, yes. But right now, I think Saylor can generate more yield by borrowing or selling converts or bonds to buy more Bitcoin.
But he can do the same, so one doesn't negate the other, right? He could be using the Bitcoin routing channels, routing payments on a channel, right? He can do that. It doesn't stop him borrowing against it, does it? Because does that put your Bitcoin at risk when you're routing payments?
Well, it would be in a hot wallet. So every Lightning node is a hot wallet.
Right.
So it's connected to the internet, and those funds are exposed to the internet, right? So there is some risk to doing that. But you have to calculate, what is Square's yield again that they said that they were
I think it was in the order of 10%.
Yeah. So the question is,
like that, yeah.
well, so if Saylor took some Bitcoin and put it into a Lightning node, and he's earning 10% on that, then that's not Bitcoin that he can borrow against or pledge, right?
Technically or theoretically, it's at risk because it's in a hot wallet.
Yeah, well, it's deployed. I don't know. Maybe he could, but I think from his point of view, that's like picking up pennies in front of the steamroller. He can just keep it all in cold storage with custodian and borrow massive amounts, sell bonds to get massive amounts of fiat to buy more Bitcoin.
Yeah, so I've just looked it up. It was 9.7% that they earned.
Yeah.
Which is, that's tempting, right? I mean, I know for Michael Saylor, it's not really tempting given what their current business model is, but at some point, it's going to make sense for them to do some of this, assuming hyper-Bitcoinization. I mean, it doesn't have to be hyper-Bitcoinization, right? It's kind of like AI with the singularity. It doesn't have to reach singularity before it presents a threat to humanity. And we don't need hyper-Bitcoinization before Bitcoin becomes a significant chunk of, global commerce or a store of value, means of exchange, those sorts of things.
One of the strategies and metrics is Bitcoin yield generated, right? Mm-hmm. And that's basically using the Bitcoin they have to get more Bitcoin. And I think it's something like 100% yield or something like that. So do you want 9 or 100? I think it's better to do what he's doing now. And you can do that as long as the fiat money printing system exists. You're basically harnessing that and turning it into Bitcoin. But when there is no more fiat someday, then probably yes, putting it into a Lightning node and routing payments could be a way to keep generating more Bitcoin.
Oh, that's fascinating. Why do you think the TradFi world still doesn't understand fully what he's doing?
But don't they? I mean, we have so many copies of strategy coming up now.
I don't look at that as TradFi doing that. If it was TradFi doing it, JP Morgan will be spinning up their own Bitcoin treasury account company with Larry Fink's already doing his ETF. But we would be seeing a lot more financial entities spinning out their Bitcoin treasury reserve companies. What I see at the moment happening is a bunch of independent CEOs and founders of relatively small companies, right? Recognizing the benefit to their company of adopting Saylor's playbook and reaping the rewards with respect to market cap. But we're not seeing anybody starting at scale. We're seeing a lot of small companies reaching out for scale, right? Ramping up to that level. Like MetaPlanet was really quite a small company to begin with, right? And now, what is it, $5 or $6 billion, right? But in the overall landscape, that's still a smallish company, right? Yeah. It's getting there, 10, 20, 30 billion. We're starting to talk about like a significant company on a global scale. And I think they could quite foreseasably get there, not too distant future.
Well, when you're saying TradFi, you're kind of speaking
Wall
to
Street.
The banks, right?
I'm talking Wall Street. Anything, and yeah, that's right. That's what I'm talking about. It's like, why aren't they, so they were quite quick to spin out ETFs in the ETF market, quite quick to spin out all these other financial products, but they're not really in the game for Bitcoin treasury vehicles, right? And then when SPACs became popularized, suddenly like a whole bunch of people were doing SPACs from TradFi, right? And then they died off and maybe they'll come back. But Bitcoin treasury reserve companies, am I mischaracterizing it in saying that it's mostly a bunch of independent entrepreneurs of smaller companies who are doing that? Because that's all I'm seeing. Maybe I've missed something, but MetaPlanet seems to be the second biggest doing a Bitcoin treasury reserve.
Well, GameStop is doing it.
Are they yet?
They have some of their coin, right? They bought some.
Yeah.
They didn't buy as much as they should have bought.
Okay, let's talk about that, right? Let's talk about it. They had $5.5 billion in cash. They raised another.
They're raising another $1 billion plus.
But before that, they raised
Yeah.
They raised 500 million or something, and now they're going to raise another billion plus after buying 500 million or so of Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, but they didn't allocate most of the previous raise to buy Bitcoin.
And so they're being very tentative when they don't need to be. Like, they could have literally bought 4 billion, 5 billion in Bitcoin and had $1 billion in cash spare. Why do you think they didn't do that? Because you're a corporate strategy guy, right? So let's tap into your corporate strategy brain from the Blockstream days. And how are you playing that game if you were them? Or what do you think they're doing?
If I was Ryan Cohen, I would have put all of it into buying Bitcoin, because that wasn't what the market expected him to do. You're going to raise, they publicized their thing, they made like an investor website looking like Berkshire Hathaway, they did all those things, and the market expected you're going to put all that into Bitcoin, and he didn't. So I think that was the first mistake, that you didn't commit to the strategy. And I guess the second mistake was not executing even when there were opportunities to execute, like dips. He might have missed that first initial chance to buy, which I can understand, because when Bitcoin is down, it's scary, right? But he could have averaged in, 500 million every month or something like that for a few months. But he didn't do that either. So I'm not sure. I think it's just fear. And given that he met with Saylor, that's really inexcusable, because you had like a one-on-one meeting with the father of the Bitcoin Treasury Company industry, and you didn't learn anything from that meeting. So, I'm not sure if he's going to make it, but there's still an opportunity, because I think anything below 200K per Bitcoin is still a steal. So he could still do it.
He could still do it. And I wonder whether or not he has any conviction, or whether he was just harvesting the hype
to raise the
cash,
capital.
More capital. I mean, he did that in the last bout of sort of roaring kitty hype when he came back, right? Yeah. Raised a few billion or whatever it was. And prior to that as well, when they had the short squeeze on. But what has he done with the cash to build out the business, to really transform it into being anything more than it was before? I guess I am asking the question rather than offering it as a critique, but I don't perceive GameStop as being materially different today than it was, 4 years ago when there was a huge short squeeze. And that's with a whole bunch of cash on hand. Where was the transformation? I think they've done a bunch of efficiencies and whatnot, cutting out businesses they don't want to hold, but where's the vision and the direction? So I'm not sure he has a conviction one way or the other.
I would say I haven't seen it yet, but I'm optimistic that he can figure it out. So
You are optimistic?
Well, I mean, he still has time. Until Bitcoin is 500K a coin, he still has time. But we know that is like a mainstream-ish company. I would quantify it as Wall Street, that has made that dip, right? They're not fully in, but they did commit to it, right? Probably better so than Tesla, I would say at this point.
What do you mean better?
Well, Tesla bought and they sold, and Elon never followed through on his promise, because he was saying, I'll accept Bitcoin for payments again if Bitcoin mining is 60% green or something
50%,
like that.
50%, yeah.
50%.
Yeah.
We'd
long surpassed that, and I kept reminding him, and he never responds, of course.
Yeah, so I would say GameStop is further along than Tesla, and I would say both of those are Wall Street companies. So we're seeing that movement, but of course, it's not where we think it should be, nor where it really should be, right? Like Microsoft last year had a chance to do something when shareholders pushed them for creating a treasury, but then they also voted against it.
I'd make the opposite argument in favor of Elon, actually. And I know last cycle, I'm well aware of what he did, and he sort of got in when the hype was big, and then he sold, and everyone was kind of disappointed with his about turn with respect to taking Bitcoin as payment, right? Yeah. But he held on to that Bitcoin. His company's held on to that Bitcoin. He owns it personally.
He sold some too. Testing liquidity.
No, but that's I sort of pointed that out. He bought a whole bunch, $1.5 billion at that time, and then he sold a bunch. But then he held on. I think Tesla has $1.5 billion Bitcoin. SpaceX probably has. I'm pretty sure Arkham has revealed their addresses, and SpaceX has a similar amount. And he's also a personal holder, so he hasn't sold since that testing liquidity nonsense.
Is he a personal holder? He said publicly.
He said he is.
He has like a quarter of a Bitcoin or something like that.
I didn't catch that. I don't know that he's quantified it publicly. I may have missed it, but he did say he has a personal holding of Bitcoin, and all his companies hold Bitcoin, he said. And so at least he's held on to that, which is now 4 years since he did that. Whereas GameStop...
Is that strategic though, or is it just because he got busy with Department of Government Efficiency and everything else?
You don't forget $1.5 billion on the balance sheet.
Well, for a big company like that, it's easy to forget about it, I think. I don't think he was actively thinking about it.
But that's how insurance should be, right? So like there's a difference between being orange-pilled all in, right, like many of us are, and some people view Bitcoin as, and rightly so, as insurance. If the system goes belly up, at least they've got insurance against currency debasement, hyperinflation, right? And at one point, nobody was sure whether or not there was going to be a runaway train of inflation. And so I think insurance, the best insurance is something that you buy and forget about, and it's always there. And I think that's a legitimate way to treat Bitcoin for a lot of people who have other productive means of building out services and products and whatever. And then also as a storage and savings mechanism. Because like, it's okay to have other focuses in life, you know? Yeah, like we need people building out the world and making it operate, right?
That's true. But you remember during the last election, I think Elon was saying something like, if Trump didn't win, then, you know, it's over for me, right? Because he was in full support of Trump and attacking the Democrats. And, you know, if Trump didn't win, he would have a big problem on his hands. And then like a few weeks ago, he and Trump had that falling out, right? So I think he should kind of clue in that maybe he should allocate more attention, at least, to Bitcoin. Because that's a safety net, right? He could easily be debanked, lose his contracts, everything like that. But if he has Bitcoin, he'll be good. I don't think he's understood that yet, even though he understands the problem.
Yeah, I do think $1.5 billion for a company of Tesla's size is underallocated, that's for sure, yeah. So I'm not arguing against that point, that's for sure. I think a company of Tesla's size and cash balance should have more than like, I don't know, what is their cash balance? 10, 20 billion?
Something like that.
Yeah, they should have more than $1.5 billion of that in Bitcoin.
Yeah. But I think Apple has even more. Berkshire has what? Yeah. How many? 500 billion in cash?
Well, interesting because there was, I tweeted like a thread of Apple's strategy to dominate Bitcoin finance, right? And I've repeated that a couple of times. And it was basically, you know, they had $150, $160 billion of cash. Buy Bitcoin, and as the most trusted entity in the world, you could afford to offer your Bitcoin stash as a backstop to any kind of security breach as a Bitcoin bank. Now, I'm not encouraging you depositing your Bitcoin with a custodian, right? But that's how most of the world will want their Bitcoin to be custodied by a trusted third party. That's just the way it is. We may not like it as the as the operator of a Bitcoin wallet, but even so, your wallet is a hot wallet, right? Like I get it. I use cold storage myself. Most of the world wants a trusted third party. You're just not going to get away from that.
Most of the world doesn't even want a trusted third party. They want a stock that has Bitcoin.
Yeah.
That's what we're seeing right now. It's an interesting phenomenon. So not even raw exposure to an ETF that has Bitcoin with a custodian, but they want the upside and potential gains of a company with Bitcoin.
Yeah, the sovereignty aspect is probably a bit down the list because not many people have gleaned the real risk of debanking as being applicable to them.
Yeah.
And I think that's a naivety that infects most of the population, that they're kind of oblivious to that. And it's the number go up, inflation hedge type of thing that is the narrative that is most relevant to them. Yeah. Fair enough. Not everybody's fighting the state. Not everybody cares to have an opinion that's going to be, I guess, going to get them debanked, right?
But it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like if you look at it, a lot of Bitcoiners probably came for Bitcoin gains back in the day. And then they went down the rabbit hole later on and understood, okay, it's a bearer asset. It's a way to protect my sovereignty, and it's insurance. So it's not necessarily bad that people are buying these stocks that have Bitcoin in them if they learn about Bitcoin. And not all of them will, but some of them will, right?
My take on the whole Bitcoin treasury strategy thing for these companies is, why do you care? Like, why do people care that they're in existence? Like, people spend so much of their time bitching and moaning about the fact that they're there. And I'm like, why do you care? Are you buying them? If you're not buying them, it doesn't affect you really. It doesn't affect Bitcoin. It might on the back end of this, if we get a bear market of the like that we just came out of.
Well, there is some valid concern that these treasury companies could trigger the next bear market. Something blows up. Right.
Well, my point is something is going to trigger the next bear market. If we get a parabolic move, which seems to be everyone's rooting for, well, we're not going to avoid a bear market, and something's going to trigger the bear market to wash out the excesses of that, right? And I think at that point, these Bitcoin treasury companies will be emblematic of the excesses of that kind of move.
It depends, I think.
Okay.
I think like a strategy type company where they have very minimal risk and all of their converts and everything are very far out will be fine. But some of the smaller companies that are trading at a huge multiple right now to MNAV, which are not as well positioned as strategy is, could blow up.
Yes, you're right. I did make that distinction in an earlier conversation with Mark Moss, is that I don't believe Saylor's company poses a risk in that regard, because I believe they're extremely well managed and disciplined. I don't have the same level of faith for all the long tail of companies in this space of treasury strategy companies. And so I guess my comments are addressing solely the long tail, because I think even MetaPlanet as a much smaller company is, pretty focused and disciplined in how they're running their business, but inevitably we're going to get, the greed's going to attract people who are not as disciplined.
Huh? But we don't know yet which is the thing.
It's inevitable. We know it's going to happen. We know. We just don't know to what scale they're going to come into the space.
It's probably going to be, I don't know, maybe Tron or something. You saw they're going public, right? And now they're a Bitcoin treasury company.
Do you know that guy?
Justin Sun? Yeah, I know him.
You know him? Okay. He's like this. I just see him every now and then float into every controversy with a comment. I have no idea who he is. I don't think I've ever seen an interview of him. Like, he could just be an avatar for all I know. Like, you know what I mean? It's like he's a real person. He actually exists in reality, right?
Yeah, he does exist. But, like altcoins becoming Bitcoin treasury companies, that reminds me of FTX, right? Like, why did FTX blow up?
FTX more than Luna?
Probably, because FTX, what it was they were using FTT, their token, as a backstop and equivocating it with, as a real asset, even though they printed it. So I think the danger there is if you have something similar set up with an altcoin, like, what is it, Cardano, they're also talking about doing something too. It just blows my mind that
we're all Bitcoiners now.
Yeah, everyone's a Bitcoiner. But I mean, most altcoins are created to get Bitcoin, so it's not that far from the origin, right? But presenting it as a publicly traded Bitcoin treasury company, that is scary to me of what could be to come.
Can we talk about these charlatans for a second? Because, like, you've been around in the space long enough to give us that context. And I guess when I saw in the last cycle, I've been in this space as a Bitcoin holder since, I'm trying to remember, is it August or October 2020? It was like a couple of months after Saylor bought. I remember his announcement, and then I bought like a few weeks later, right? And so when I saw, for example, what's his name? I just mentioned it, Terra Luna buying Bitcoin.
People cheered Like Una's.
No, I interviewed him.
Yeah.
I interviewed him on Spaces.
Really?
Right? Yeah, because I didn't care that he was the operator of a what do you call it? An algorithmic stablecoin, so-called. Right? That's a sophisticated name. It's dressing up a Ponzi scheme, right? I didn't care about it. I just thought, oh, he's buying Bitcoin. That's fantastic, right? I didn't care about why he was buying it. Just like now, I don't really care about why companies buy Bitcoin. But on the back end of that, we saw the doom loop that they entered into, and they thought Bitcoin would be a backstop against that, and it just wasn't. How do I get into that? You can tell fatigue is setting in now. It's like
You're not as jet lagged as me.
No, I'm not jet lagged at all. I wish I could have that excuse. I was asking you about these charlatans. So I didn't really have that depth of understanding of the cycle about the sorts of players that would come in and scheme with various devices. But can you just run us from, I guess the first wave of shitcoinery was the ICOs, wasn't it? Can you run us through what that was like, and then to the so-called DeFi summer era of shitcoinery, and now seemingly that's just like they have no narrative right now, and it's unmitigated degeneracy, gambling. It's just memes and pump fun nonsense. So how do you see the evolution of shitcoinery, and what was it like in each of those eras?
Well, I would say the early stage of shitcoinery, there was a lot more effort into things, right? So it just kind of degenerates over time like everything else. But the first batch, they try to be more like Bitcoin. They're all mostly proof of work coins. Even Ethereum was a proof of work coin, right? So you want to mirror Bitcoin as much as possible with a differentiator, like Bitcoin with smart contracts. That's Ethereum's pitch, right?
Bitcoin, but cheaper transactions or faster transactions.
Yeah,
that's what
stuff like that.
Yeah.
But there's a proof of work element, right? Then you have the next generation, which figured, well, that's actually hard work. And the proof of work can be used as a critique. Because if you have low proof of work and no one's mining it, then it doesn't look good. So then you move into things like proof of stake. And you have a proliferation of proof of stake systems like Tron, it fits into that category, and other ones too. And then you degenerate even more into just meme coins. Now it's not even like it's a network and it's a protocol. Now it's a meme coin. And that's good enough.
Yeah.
We have a great community. Buy it. And now, I don't know what it is, but you can see it just loses effort with every successive iteration of it because it gets easier and easier. Now it doesn't matter. Like, people are happy buying it.
But I almost have respect for the barefaced degeneracy now, where they're not even pretending. It's just like, no, it's just, you know what I mean? It's like, in a perverse kind of way, the lack of effort in pretending to be something they're not, and they're just saying, it's just a meme. And I almost have a kind of respect for the honesty of that, right? Like, at least if you're going to get rugged and you're going to lose a bunch of money, I'm like, well, you knew what it was, right? No one was pretending to you that it was an investment scheme.
Yeah, well, some people are saying like Solana is more honest than Ethereum, right? It's just that we're centralized, but Ethereum likes to pretend they're decentralized.
Are they still doing that?
Well, you ask Vitalik.
Am I misreading Vitalik in thinking he's having, not in second thoughts, like third and fourth thoughts about all the things like unwinding proof of work or abandoning proof of work and moving to proof of stake? It seems like he's equivocating on that and perhaps lamenting his decision to do that.
You think so? I haven't seen that.
No? Maybe I'm misreading him.
I don't follow him that much. Other than
he seems, I think since the bear market, he just seems to be in this kind of existential daze about Ethereum. You don't sense that?
I don't follow that closely.
I don't follow him closely either, but every time he pops his head up on a timeline, which is not very often, he makes it onto mine, right? And so I'm like, this is not the guy, he doesn't speak with courage, and not courage, the courage of his convictions, with any kind of defined direction and purpose for Ethereum. Like, at least he used to once. You didn't have to believe what he said, but he used to speak that way as a kind of thought leader. And this is where we're going to do. This is what we're going to do. This is where we're taking it. And I'm like, I don't see that anymore from him.
Maybe so, but I remember the last time he popped up on my timeline was when he sort of took control of Ethereum Foundation and said, I'm running this now. So, he's still involved, but I think their whole narrative is crumbling, especially with the drop in price against Bitcoin, right? They're just unable to hold their own against Bitcoin. And that is probably the most, the biggest weakness of the thing right now. Because they were always supposed to be better. And they marketed it that way, you pushed it that way, but now evidence shows you're not better. And these other things, seemingly like Solana, are overtaking for being better at being Ethereum than Ethereum is.
So what did they try to do? At first they said, we're kind of like Bitcoin, but better, faster, more efficient, whatever. And then it turned out to be really expensive, much slower, much more cumbersome.
At the very, very, very first, they said, we can't compete with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is number one.
Oh, did they? Okay.
We're going to try to do something different with smart contracts.
Yeah.
And then after they finished their ICO and they had money, that was when the narrative changed and they started pushing the whole thing like we were better than Bitcoin. And you got the whole flippening narrative that we're going to flip Bitcoin's market cap.
So Solana doesn't pretend about competing on decentralization. They said we're centralized.
I don't know if they say it, but it's obvious that it's centralized.
Right.
They don't really...
They switch it on and off for the guy.
Yeah.
For the love of God. They switch it on and off, literally, right? Like if you, that's literally single point of failure, right? But my point is from the people I've spoken to who have used that compared to Ethereum, they're like, well, it just works like it should when it's on. Yeah. Or compared to Ethereum, it's less clunky, it's easy to use, smoother, cheaper, faster, all the rest of that. And it's kind of like Ethereum has been out Ethereum'd by its rival, and it's still nowhere near what it thought it would be as a rival to Bitcoin. And so it's been squeezed at one end, it could never compete with Bitcoin, and on the other, it's been out shitcoined by... And isn't that what we've been saying all along, though? There is no competitive moat to Ethereum, right? Yeah. And so why wouldn't they just be...
Well, you're always going to have something newer and fresher that's going to try to be Ethereum, right? So that's why you can't really invest in these things because they're targeting a market of being innovative, and you can always have something more innovative to overtake the last one.
So Ethereum's always benefited from the investment grade quality of Bitcoin and its market cap. No matter if you were a Bitcoiner or not, at each point of every cycle, it was kind of amazing that it was hitting these heights in market capitalization. But what would Ethereum be worth if Bitcoin didn't exist? If it was a standalone, because it would then be priced at what? As on its commercial metrics, right? So I have no idea of what kind of revenue it makes. But would it even be 10% of its current market cap without Bitcoin?
Well, without Bitcoin, it wouldn't exist because it's a copy of Bitcoin in many ways, right?
Yeah, but as a thought experiment.
But as a thought experiment, I don't know. It should be the utility of the network. So the network doesn't function when the gas is so expensive. So it has to be fairly low value to do what it does, right? You wouldn't want to, in Vitalik's own words, you shouldn't pay more than 5 cents a transaction or something like that. So however many transactions, 5 cents. Yeah, it's just the conundrum. You're trying to offer this utility service that's meant to do all these things like computation, but then you also have people speculating on the value of the token, which is the fuel for that computation and transaction engine. So it kind of doesn't work. Either it goes up in value and you can't use it for what it's supposed to be doing, or it can do what it's supposed to do, but it's not going to have value because you can't use it otherwise.
One impedes the other. Okay. In some sense, I'm kind of really happy with this cycle that there's none of that bullshit at them yet. There's no bullshit narrative yet with respect to alts. They're not pretending. I kind of like that because when I came in, they genuinely thought they were changing the world with decentralized, so-called decentralized finance, and now it's just and everyone's becoming a Bitcoiner. But I'm just wondering what they will come up with next. nation state adoption. What's happening in the world of orange pilling sovereigns?
With the strategic reserve, the executive order for that, and new developments is probably the most interesting aspect of nation state adoption right now. Mm-hmm. But you do see follow-on with that. Like Pakistan announced that they're setting up their own strategic reserve. They appointed Saylor. I haven't fact-checked that.
I haven't seen anything verified on that.
I've seen it, but I haven't verified it.
Yeah.
So take that with a grain of salt that he's their advisor now. But, you know, it's whether the US makes a big move, like a really tangible move, like passing the Bitcoin Act and actively accumulating Bitcoin, I think that is going to be the next big driver for nation state adoption. But we'll see like little bits and pieces happening here and there. And we do have our engagements and we're trying to move things along, but it's difficult. Like if you think of it as a normal person, where does Bitcoin stack up in your attention span in a given day? It's probably like, you know, towards the bottom somewhere. It's the same for countries. Like they're always focused on some higher level drama, like, you know, Iran and Israel right now, probably top of mind. But it's difficult to kind of get them to prioritize something. But one silver lining, I think, of the Bitcoin Treasury Companies is that they're elevating that in the awareness. Like in Japan, we engaged with a number of politicians there. MetaPlanet definitely has picked up on all of their radars. We cannot not pick up on MetaPlanet.
It's legitimately a big deal in Japan, right?
It is.
I mean, I know we talk about it in our little bubble, and it's easy for us to, I guess, inflate the importance of some of the events that are happening in Bitcoin. But are we talking mainstream finance in Japan or just the general population?
I would say so. Like it's definitely hitting mainstream financial media, right? Because every day they're gapping up. It's like top volume of all stocks. You cannot ignore this.
And we have an interesting phenomenon. They have an interesting phenomenon in Japan where stock investing, household finances are done by the wife, the woman in the house, right? It's not the man who does it, right?
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting phenomenon. I guess how has MetaPlanet, or has it tapped into that aspect of society as well from a retail investor point of view?
I'm not sure, but I just know that there's a ton of retail interest. Like at their shareholder meeting, they held it at the Grand Hyatt, and the lineup to take a photo like out the door, it's a full ballroom, like as big as a conference, as big as many Bitcoin conferences. So you have to at least admire what they've managed to achieve and the level of interest that they've managed to generate for a Bitcoin Treasury company.
So are there more, have you heard of any other companies in Japan, given, you know, their history with, their financial history with, I guess, inflation and monetary debasement over 30, 40 years? You know, you would imagine that society would have been looking for something like this for some time in terms of Bitcoin, but now that there's been an established investment vehicle and a demonstrated track record of its success, my guess would be that there would be other companies in Japan lining up to replicate that. Have you heard of? There are?
Yeah, there's a couple. I can't remember the names, but I see like so-and-so company bought 5 million or 3 million. They're popping up now. So it's becoming more of a thing. But you would have thought that Japan would be big into real Bitcoin, like self-custodial Bitcoin. But I think it is difficult still. Like we managed to understand it, but the average person just doesn't want to deal with the hassle of hanging on to Bitcoin, right? It's just a burden that they don't want to deal with.
So how do we deal as an industry? How do we deal with this persistent attitude that I agree with? Most people are intimidated by it, and then yet when you talk about the people who build wallets and the technical people, they couch the discussion in terms of intellectual deficiency of retail. Like if you're either too stupid and you don't deserve it, right? Or they will say, if you can do this, then you can do that. In other words, tough. You either do it the way it is or not at all. And I'm like, well, surely it's incumbent on the industry to accommodate or find a better way for retail to self-custody. Like, surely that's the responsibility, right? Rather than just saying, I mean, it's kind of like before Apple, there were only these Windows, not only, but, they dominated. And everybody thought that was the only way that personal computers could be manufactured. And it was only when they came in and they simplified a lot of things, made them a lot easier, then, wow, isn't this a fantastic
I
thing?
think there's a few barriers. Like, one is tax treatment, right? For a lot of countries, if you're spending Bitcoin, technically it's a capital gains taxable event. And that is a barrier. So for Japan, I think that's the case too. So you're kind of disincentivized to dealing with spending Bitcoin. And actually, I met someone in Japan before, and they were saying they're using Aqua Wallet to maintain a separate Bitcoin stack because Bitcoin is Bitcoin, and he can keep it in cold storage, but he'll get liquid Bitcoin, which is not Bitcoin, and he can just expend it and manage that, and file his taxes accordingly for each transaction, but not have to interfere with his main stack. So that's an interesting workaround. But what you said earlier is right. Like, we need to make more accessible tools and make them so beneficial that you want to have your own Bitcoin in your own wallet so that you can do all these things like, pay bills and convert and, use it in many beneficial ways in your life. So I think that is one step. But the other aspect of it, I think, is simply just time and learning. It just takes time that people need. They need to understand that they should hold their own assets. And it's a big gap going from your money's in your bank and it's safe, quote unquote, to I need to keep my own money and take responsibility for that completely on my own, 100%. And if it is lost or stolen, it's gone for good. And that chasm is a big chasm. And I don't know if there's a shortcut to get there. And I don't even know if we can fully bridge that just by making better Bitcoin wallets. It just might be a natural phenomenon that takes time. Like, one thing I think helped for Canada was when the government declared martial law and started freezing bank accounts. And I think that educated a lot of Canadians into realizing, well, I probably need some insurance in the form of Bitcoin, which cannot be frozen. Because that was unprecedented, but it showed how fragile the traditional system is. Like, the government can just say, okay, you're a terrorist now because you donated to this convoy protesting lockdowns and mandated vaccine injections. And that is pretty shocking to most people, that in a Western country, liberal democracy, that you can have this type of totalitarian, authoritarian acts happening. And it can happen anywhere. But outside of that, if that didn't happen, I would say a lot of people wouldn't understand that or cross that chasm. But because it happened, they did. So it's almost like you have to have that pain before you will move out of your comfort zone.
Let's do a quick tour around the world. We've got United States, of course. That's I think the changes we've had, or the progress we've experienced there in the first 6 months, at least from a legislative point of view, and political support has been fantastic. We're yet to see Trump follow through on that, but we're hearing a lot of noises from like David Sachs and Bo Hines saying this is going to be, bigger than people imagine, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. Then a whole bunch of states who are actually pushing through legislation to establish strategic Bitcoin reserves for themselves. We've got a bunch of companies doing the same, adopting it as a corporate treasury, not becoming Bitcoin treasury companies as such, but using Bitcoin as part of their asset mix on their balance sheet, which is fantastic. That's what we want to see as well, operating companies allocating to Bitcoin in addition to whatever else that they use. It's just part of their treasury management. That's fantastic. ETFs, phenomenal success. I don't think many people expected that level of success. All right, the most successful ETFs in history, ETF launches. And that seems to be that's just going to get stronger and stronger, it seems like. We could see a multi-year boom in ETF flows for Bitcoin. Municipalities are starting to, some pension funds are starting to allocate to Bitcoin. So
State level too in the US.
Yeah, state level, yep. And so that's fantastic. And then we move over to Europe, okay? Very slow. It's like nothing's really happened yet at the state level. We're seeing just some noises. It kind of feels like we're in 2022 in Europe compared to the United States. It's like 3 years ago. And things are not really progressing much. The banks, surprisingly, this is what I'm really surprised at. European banks seem to be they're embracing Bitcoin in advance of political support, unlike what happened in the United States.
Really?
Yeah. So like when I was watching, so it was only once, so prior to BlackRock, okay, you had Fidelity, they've been orange pilled forever. But prior to BlackRock, really you didn't have too many Wall Street firms. And now most of the banks are now coming to it, like JP Morgan is like, all right, so I guess we're doing this thing, right?
Well, JP Morgan has their blockchain now.
Yeah, so, and a bunch of others, right? And in the last cycle, they sort of made some noises about training up various, their advising teams, wealth advising teams, all the rest of that, but it never amounted to anything, right? And I think this time around, they're like, okay, we've got the green light from the White House. I guess we're doing this, and they're into it. In Europe, it's the opposite. I feel like I look around in Germany, Spain, the various big banks around there, they've got none of the political support that American banks now have. And they're going ahead with it anyway. It's almost like they're able to act independently of it. In the absence of a red light, they're not waiting for a green light necessarily, but it's still pockets and corners. I mean, they are big banks. Santander is a massive bank. Is it Deutsche Welle? No, that's a media company. Deutsche Bank, sorry. They're doing things there. Deutsche Telekom is mining Bitcoin, actually.
Yeah,
Did you know that? Yeah. So like that's phenomenal, right? And there's various things happening in Switzerland. There was a supermarket chain that's launching a bunch of Bitcoin ATMs and Bitcoin Lightning payments as well, acceptance. So lots of things are kind of happening
right here,
that way.
Czech central bank holding Bitcoin.
I don't think that happened.
Are you sure?
I think what happened was there might have been. Did they actually? I don't think they followed through.
I think they followed through. I don't know if they have Bitcoin yet, though.
Okay, I need to follow up on that. The thing is, like, the news just comes and goes. Like, and I'm constantly scanning for news. That I find it hard to retain all of the details because I never get to read deeply about all the various issues that are progressing around the world because it's just constant. It's just a constant flush.
Have you noticed it? It's accelerating. Like the pace at which the news is coming, companies buying. Like I can't keep track anymore of all the companies buying.
Yeah, and that's why I'm having to exercise a fair bit of caution about the companies that do make these announcements. I don't believe them, and I see like people on Twitter just tweeting them as a reflex, and I'm like, hey, don't you got to exercise some caution about the veracity of their claims? If someone says we're raising 100 million and they got a market cap of 500,000, do you just reflexively post that? Are you not participating in a potential pump and dump?
Yeah, but like we talked about before, people don't seem to care. They want the engagement farming and they want the attention.
No comment.
We know who they are. We know who they are.
I mean, I try to stay away from the drama and just let people, what's the saying? Just sit on the banks of the river and watch them float by eventually. So it's like, I don't mind if that's what they want to do. And so to Asia, I know Hong Kong, Singapore. I'm not sure if I've seen anything from Malaysia, Indonesia. Fill in the gaps where I'm missing out.
Well, we have some engagements in Malaysia and Indonesia. Hopefully, we'll get something going.
Yeah?
Maybe within this year. We'll see.
Okay, because I love what Bhutan's done, right? And I know some people are a bit dirty on them for selling, but I'm like, listen, it's a small country. It's not a wealthy country, right? It's a small country. They're mining Bitcoin to build infrastructure, to build schools, to build highways, airports, and things like this. Like, don't you go to work and earn a living and then spend that money? Yeah. So what's wrong with them doing it?
Well, they absolutely need those things because it opens the door to more investments.
Yeah.
Like when I meet with a lot of governments in less developed countries, one of the things I say is you can mine Bitcoin and build a hospital and road and railways or whatever, but that is a central part of it. Like you can mine the Bitcoin to get other things to develop the country. And I think there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But Bhutan is a great example.
It is a great example, isn't it? Especially like most of their energy for Bitcoin mining is like
Green.
Hydro electricity, right? Like that would otherwise just be a river flowing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like and then making money from that. And I just think that's fantastic, right? What else have we got?
There is a little bit of movement in Taiwan.
Yeah.
So we met with one of the legislators there, JC, and we're going to see if we can move it forward more. But yeah, that's there. Japan, hopefully something will happen soon.
I just would have thought Japan would be all in already. Like Japan as a society, not necessarily the government, because I know the government always wants to maintain the monopoly of printing its own currency and all the rest of that. But as a society, that they would recognise it more readily.
It's really hard to move. Like, it's slow moving. You need to have agreement, and everyone is risk averse. That's the biggest thing that we've learned from engaging with governments. They're all very risk averse. So if you look at it,
from the financial risk or publicity risk, everything, just whatever.
So if you look at a company, like let's say GameStop again, right? It's career risk. Like if Ryan Cohen goes all in and it doesn't work and it crashes, then he'll end his career. And it's the same, but political career risk for politicians, right? If they advocate for Bitcoin and Bitcoin goes down, then they look bad. Even though we know Bitcoin will go back up, they're still concerned about these things. But it's got to get to the point where it's career risk not to get into Bitcoin. And I think a lot of them also are waiting for someone else to make a move, specifically the US. That's why I'm very bullish or grateful for movements in the US, because that makes our job a lot easier, because we will just say, like, look at the US, right? Like Korea will look at the US, Japan will look at the US, Taiwan will look at the US. And you saw that with the ETFs. And I think when the US does something seriously with accumulating for their Bitcoin reserve, everyone else will follow. So we're just kind of priming all the different actors in Asia to wait for that. And when it happens, we'll go back and say it's time to execute on what we talked about.
So I spoke to Jeff Park from Bitwise, who I'm sure you're familiar with, and I said, well, what do you make out of the strategic Bitcoin reserve? And he said, nothing. If it's an executive order, it can be reversed when the next president comes in. And I said, well, okay, what kind of weight do you give it? He's like, I give it 0 because an executive order can just be reversed. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's true. But I think with great political cost, I wonder if I'm curious about how the Democrats will react to the effectiveness of the Crypto Political Action Committee that, they mobilized in the space of 12, 18 months, and they were very, very effective, very powerful and very effective. I think they're starting to realize what happened to them as a result of their position on crypto in general, shall we say, right? Because it wasn't just Bitcoin companies doing that, it was the crypto industry, so to speak, right? So I wonder, what is their reaction going to be now? Are they going to restock and say, hey, I think we got that wrong. I think we need to be more conciliatory and facilitating of this industry's ambitions, and I think that's going to be a good thing for the country? Or do they become even more belligerent and vindictive and say, we're going to unwind everything this motherfucker does for this industry as payback for what they did to us in getting Trump re-elected? I can't read anything one way or the other yet, but it's
It's too early.
It is too early, but I'm kind of encouraged by some more of the bipartisan voices, some more Democrats voicing support for the industry, but I don't see their leadership doing that, and I don't see a chorus of support coming from them. How do you see that?
Well, I see the concern that you have. I've said the same thing. Like, it's a pendulum. If it swings too far one way, it'll swing harder the other way. So we'll see. But I think there are things that we can do because the next election is not for a while. Like, bipartisan groups should engage with Democrats and educate them more about Bitcoin. But yeah, I can't read it either way. We'll see. But I think Jeff is wrong that it's a nothing burger. It just depends on if, I don't know, Bo Hines or David Sachs can actually execute on the budget neutral acquisition. And I'm still hopeful that they can get that across because it's within the scope of the executive order. At the same time, I hope that the Bitcoin Act passes and they can actually formally do something. But I think the tone setting of the executive order is a very important piece of this because we can take that and go to other countries and say, hey, look at that. And while it's not active accumulation, it is at least something that we can present. And everyone looks to the US for guidance. If you look at the ETFs, it's the same thing. US started and then, well, Canada kind of had them, but it wasn't until the US made the move that Hong Kong ETFs and Australian ETFs came. And now we're seeing other regions look to open up to ETFs, if not launch their own. Like Korea, that's one thing they're looking at too.
So that's one thing Europe also beat the United States. They had Bitcoin ETPs before the ETF announcement, but it just seems at the sovereign level there's just this impasse. There's no motivation, there's no impetus to get involved, or even just facilitating the industry. Even if at the sovereign level, the central banks don't want to do anything, they don't acknowledge the fact that the industry needs legislation that allows them to just do what they need to do to be competitive on a global scale. Like United Kingdom, London in particular, where I live, it's got a long pedigree and history of being the global financial capital and trade capital at various points, right? Most recently, from the last financial boom, it was essentially the finance capital of the world. That's gone now. It's no longer that. Yeah. But there is this long history of it being a finance centre, and it can draw upon the expertise, the infrastructure, the existing capital markets, all of that stuff to be a leader in this industry. And it's just doing nothing. And it doesn't make any sense to me why that's the case. Like they're not even, and this is a nation that after Brexit, it's lost its mojo, right? There is no direction. The once giant industry that, it sort of waved the British flag internationally is no more, right? Like it's not even up for issue anymore, up for discussion anymore. London's not the finance capital of the world anymore. And they're not even looking at this as an opportunity. It's just, there's a sort of malaise about the country and the city. And they're just like in denial about what's happened. And they have no idea what to do about it.
Yeah, a lot of financial centers just kind of self-obliterated, right? Like Hong Kong is another good example. It's massively declined from the glory days when it was also a financial center. But, if they wake up and they embrace Bitcoin, there's a chance to recover. The question is, how do they wake up?
Yeah. So in your discussions with various sovereigns, which part of government seems to invite the discussion and which parts tend to demonstrate the most resistance to the idea of Bitcoin? So who is inviting you to have chats? Which, I don't mean literally individuals, but which parts of government typically do that?
Well, the meetings that we get, usually it's someone close to the head of state, like the president or prime minister. And we do get some engagement from different departments. Like in Japan, we met with the Ministry of Finance through one of our contacts there. And we met with the Bank of Japan too. What else did we meet? Yeah, a lot of politicians as well. It just varies. There's no specific group in the government that's advocating. And We've even met with like some central banks too, like calls and meeting in person. So it's really across the board.
So what do they want to know?
Well, one central bank we met with, they were just curious about Bitcoin, but they were also very negative towards it too, which is kind of weird because they wanted to talk to us and then they're kind of negative about it the whole call. So I think they're just trying to research and fact find.
Yeah. Do you find that any of them are looking to be convinced of something? Like, do they come to you with problems about Bitcoin? Do they surface the objections first?
Let me think. So Bank of Japan, we were trying to advocating for them to do something with Bitcoin. But their attitude is more conservative and saying like, we can't do anything. Like, off the bat, nothing can be done. So the other one we had a call with, I don't want to disclose it, but they were keen to set up a meeting with us and talk about Bitcoin. And we spent like 45 minutes talking about the entire landscape. And they're just kind of like, yeah, that's cool, but we don't need it. So it's a mixed bag, but things change too. Like we met with the Central Bank of Suriname when we were in Suriname and we met the president there. And we had very good discussions for months. And we were proposing that they put 1% of their reserves into Bitcoin. And that was why we actually made the trip down there, because the discussions progressed quite well. But then after we went there, the World Bank came a few weeks later and then they stopped replying to us. So there's a lot of different factors at play, and if they're responsive or if they will even do anything.
So it makes sense to me in some regards why nation states might be resistant, right? Especially, let's say, the government, right? Prime ministers, reserve banks and whatever, they've got a particular interest to defend. But why wouldn't more commercial entities, especially in a place like Japan, why aren't they more enthusiastic about it? I'm not talking about the MetaPlanets and the similar sort of trail of companies that will follow in their wake, but like Sony Corporation, for example, or any of the larger Japanese commercial industrial entities. Like, are they expressing any interest in this? Have you had any sort of inbound feelers from commercial entities?
No, we haven't targeted them, but generally, like those large corporations are very risk averse.
But
and
more risk averse than a nation state?
yes,
Really?
You wouldn't think so, but
Yeah.
almost at the same level. But the funny thing is that they're interested in like blockchain technology, like.
To do what? But they love talking about it, don't they?
Yeah, like I think it's just like a new technology, even though it's not new technology. Like Sony they bought an exchange, and I think they're trying to do some Web3 blockchain projects.
So they read a LinkedIn post in 2011 and they finally had the courage to raise it at a committee meeting at Sony. And so he's finally had it registered as an agenda item and he's going to get his chance to shine, right? Let's talk about blockchain, not Bitcoin.
Yeah, we're back in like 2015 or something like that.
It feels that way. I remember I might have even echoed that sentiment back in like 2013. And I'm looking back, I don't even know what I meant by it. I may have only said it once or twice in my life. And I didn't know much about Bitcoin, let alone blockchain. Why did I say that? Did I read it in The Economist or something? I thought it was something smart to say.
I don't know. Bitcoin is just like Bitcoin is an alien concept still. Like, even though we had a lot of meetings and we would say, this is earlier when the ATS first launched.
Are you talking in a corporate setting, it's alien to them, or?
Well, both. Anything.
Okay, yeah.
Any setting. It's still alien technology. But when the ETFs launched, we would go and have meetings and we would say, guess what? The largest asset manager on the planet has launched a Bitcoin ETF and it's wildly successful. And they're like, okay, cool.
Not moved by that at all?
It's an alien concept.
And are you getting that reaction across the world, or is specifically like
It's getting better now.
Japanese, Asian context?
Across the world, but it's getting better. It's getting better.
So why is it getting better then?
I think
if Larry Fink can't move you, right?
A lot of
The White House can't move you. What's happening that's moving the needle?
Well, I think the White House is moving.
Is moving. Okay.
It is moving.
Right.
That's what it's making it more palatable now, right?
Yeah.
Like I think the new president of Korea has spoken favorably, and we have contacts there.
Well, that was
are
bipartisan, wasn't it? Because both the opposition and the incumbent said that they would enact pro-Bitcoin legislation.
Yeah. I think it's just time. It takes time for things to percolate. So, the first 6 months after ETF launch, even though it's successful, it's not enough. But now we have, a year plus of data, and you have the US moving on it and Trump talking about it. It's slowly getting into their systems, and it's like simmering and getting close to warming.
I think sometimes as a community, we tend to meme things into existence, right? But often the memes are like 6 years too early, right? So like the super cycle theory, maybe it was 6 years early. Amiga candle, you promised me an Amiga candle, fuck you.
It's coming.
It's in 6 years, right? My point, no, my point is, it will probably go from 10 million to 11 million in about 7 or 8 years, right? I believe you, but it's like, do you think sometimes we're so immersed in the concepts and the ideas of Bitcoin, and I think it's kind of like watching something unfold in slow motion, right? It's like we can see the big moving parts, we can see the necessities in our not commercial, but economic realities. We can see that, and we can see what that's going to necessitate and how Bitcoin's going to benefit from that. But sometimes we are so far ahead of that curve that we speak of those eventualities as if they've already happened in a kind of delusional stupor. Right? And so we're walking around as if we're already in the future, right? But it's
pretty much.
Yeah. But it's a kind of delusion in speaking and living that way right now.
Yeah. If you look at population demographics, regardless of countries, right? Like there are us on the right curve or left curve. I don't know, you pick which one. But then there's the middle of the curve. And when you're engaging with the governments and just companies, that is the middle curve. How do you move the middle curve over? It's very difficult. That is the average of people.
Yeah.
So getting them to get into Bitcoin, which is still leading edge, is not an easy thing to do.
There is a kind of sadness in the realization that I've had and a resignation that I've had in that most people, they're going to come to Bitcoin much later than we would all have liked for their own benefit. And they will end up putting money into Bitcoin at a time when you're like, so I can either give it to the bank, deposit my money in a bank for 4%, or I can get 8% in Bitcoin, so I'm going to make a 50% allocation. And man, why didn't you just do this 10 years ago, right? Because we all have regrets about not buying more 5-10 years ago. And I just think I'm resigned to the fact that they're not going to be moved until they get a call from their wealth advisor, from their accountant, from their bank.
It might be worse than that. It might be that, this is my Max Payne theory, that it's the most likely outcome is the Max Payne for the world, which is that we have Hyperbitcoinization, we have Omega candles. Bitcoin goes up very rapidly in a very short time, and if people just earn Bitcoin, you don't even get a call from your financial advisor. It's just your paycheck is in Bitcoin and you're going to get 15 sats an hour.
Wow, you think there could be a turning point, not even a turning point. What am I looking at? A flashpoint once we cross a threshold and it just goes crazy.
Monetary collapse is usually very abrupt. If you look at history, the collapse of the German mark, it's not 10 years, it's a year. And you have massive swings in volatility. Well, from the UK, just from the UK perspective, how much of the pensions are underfunded? I think
I haven't looked at the numbers, but they've got a problem with underfunded pensions, just like Social Security in the United States.
Yeah, but there's a lot of underfunded liabilities, and that's got to come to a head very soon. Outside of everything else that's happening with Bitcoin, right? So it feels like we're coming to a head for everything. You have massive demand from all of these treasury companies buying, Microstrategy. You have ETFs now with 1.3 million and more coming in. There's a massive imbalance of money coming in versus coming out. Flows are net positive for ETFs. Then if nation states come into the fray, and that hits a point at which, debt is no longer able to be sold, the US Treasuries, they're having a hard time selling them now, which is also why they're turning stablecoins. And you have unfunded liabilities coming to due, what happens? Something happens there, something spectacular.
Yeah, my mind is drifting off. Like when you said you'll just wake up one day and you'll be told you're getting paid in Bitcoin because domestic currency is no longer a viable option. Where do you think that will happen first? Because I look around the world and go, okay, there are vulnerable countries right now, right? But their populations are turning to stable coins, US dollars immediately, right? Yeah. So I think they're not going to wake up and that's going to happen because they have other alternatives that their governments and employers will prefer. So like the only viable scenario in which I see something like that happening is if one of the top G7 currencies experiences like hyperinflation. Could happen, right? Yeah. Could happen. We don't know when that can happen, but it absolutely could happen. So I'm like, each of those in the G7, if they have a stronger currency above them, will probably again go off and prefer the US dollar above that, right? So it's only if it happens at the US dollar level. Right?
Yeah, but it's looking likely, right? If no one's buying treasuries and the debt is ballooning, something's got to give eventually.
Yeah.
I think the banking regulations were just changed. I saw something come out today, and the banks are even held to having less reserves for everything. So it's like they're tinkering with the mechanics of the system right now to alleviate stress on the system, which is constantly building. And maybe stablecoins will stave it off for a year if they push for adoption of stablecoins and they're using stablecoins as a proxy to sell debt. But even that's just kicking the can. But all those trillions in unfunded liabilities have to come due.
Well, the primary issue, well, there's two issues, right? There's the debt and the deficit. And the deficit is growing, which is feeding the debt, and their interest payment as a line item on their budget in the United States
Like what, trillion
is now
dollar?
approaching, is it second? Approaching the first? So what's the largest? The largest is defense, right?
I think it crossed defense.
Did it?
That's a check.
So it's one of the
It's
top
getting
2
to
or
a
3,
trillion
right?
a year.
Yeah, it's like it's over $1 trillion in interest expense. $1 trillion in interest expense, money they've borrowed to fund government spending.
And then they have the big, beautiful bill, which was a point of debate like a week ago. Like things happen so fast.
Yeah.
But I think it's passing, right?
It looks that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, whatever it is, it's going to add to the deficit and the debt. So I don't know what their output is. Like I'm, my family's from Turkey, right? Now I know just in my lifetime alone, they've reset their currency twice that I can remember. Yeah. I didn't live through that because I'm not from there, but we're from there, right? But it's almost like the next day people just get on with life. It's like nothing happened, right?
But with Bitcoin, you can't reset a currency anymore.
I know.
You can reset if there's no other choice.
I'm thinking about the United States resetting its currency.
I don't think you can. Not with Bitcoin.
You don't think with Bitcoin as an option you can reset a sovereign currency?
You can reset a currency if there's no other choice, right? Like, if the people have nothing else to turn to, then you can reboot it. Like Argentina, Taiwan, like lots of countries reset all the time. And here's a new one. But if there is an alternative, like, okay, let's break it down a little bit. So let's say you're an African country and you want to reset. You can do that because dollars are not that accessible to the population. But now you have dollars that are accessible. So like for Nigeria, they tried to push the e-naira, but no one was adopting it. And I think that's likely because everyone was using stablecoins. So you have the naira still, but you have that alternative. Now for the US, well, first of all, I don't think you can reset the reserve currency of the world. I think it's too difficult because everyone is using it, right? It's just going to either fail or not fail.
So I think you can reset it, but whether or not you remain the global reserve currency after that is a different story.
Right, but if you have an alternative, it's really hard to reset. If you say we're going to have new US dollar, would people rather have Bitcoin? And if we have all the mechanisms to use Bitcoin as money, like all the wallets and cheap payments, wouldn't they just go into Bitcoin? Like if the news came out one day, we're going to make new US dollars, would people scramble to get into Bitcoin or sit with their dollars and wait for the conversion point of new US dollars?
So we can use the Turkey example and the US dollar in place of Bitcoin, because in Turkey people have access to the US dollar, right? And so my cousins, for example, for the longest time I knew when I was, when they were younger, they would work and save in dollars, convert. They never really held anything in Turkish lira unless they wanted to spend it in an immediate sense, right? So
Real dollars or stablecoin dollars?
No, US dollars. There were no
Real.
stable coins back then,
Okay.
right? So I'm quite a lot older than perhaps you sense. No, real dollars, real US dollars, right? So if we can substitute Bitcoin for US dollars and use it as the alternative to the Turkish lira, when the lira reset, right, there was kind of a relief, there was kind of, I guess, some kind of World Bank, IMF bailout package, restored some level, some semblance of stability. It kind of did all right, but within a certain amount of time, it would continue its gradual decline until there was another economic crisis and the same thing would happen again. Every 15 or 20 years, I guess it's the sort of thing that's happening, right? So like, I look at that scenario and I think, why wouldn't that play out just the same if the US dollar reset its currency? You see what I mean? I guess substituting the US dollar in the Turkish example for Bitcoin is like, okay, maybe they would hold Bitcoin for a time, and then the US dollar would never recover its status again as global reserve currency. But the domestic market in the United States, they would continue using the US dollar. I don't think it would just switch over. I don't think. So
We'll
long
have
as
to
this-
see. We'll have to see.
So here's my theory about hyper-Bitcoinization. Is the thing is like, at least in the immediate future, in the next 10, 20, maybe even 30 years, right? 30 is a bit more speculative. But I just think Bitcoin is not going to take over a G7 country as a predominant means of exchange unless one of those states falls into complete disarray, right? And no one wants to live in a failed state. So the thing is, if you don't want to live in a failed state, that means by extension of that, there will be enough confidence in the state for it to issue its own currency. Because the only states that can't issue a sustainable currency are basically failed states, right? Anything that has some kind of semblance of stability, some level of confidence in the operation of the administration, issues its own currency. And I don't think any state will ever give that up. And I think so long as a state is not failed, people will have enough confidence to use that kind of currency, right? And I don't know how Bitcoin dislodges that logic in my mind yet.
Well, I think they're going to fight and try to maintain power over the printing press for various reasons, like for their view of why it's good for society. But I think if people recognize Bitcoin as an alternative, and it is like a practical replacement, I don't see them switching. It's just like the CBDC in Nigeria never took off. You could almost use the CBDC as a proxy for a currency reset. Are people going to use it? And I think even in China, people aren't willing to use the CBDC. They're still sticking with, WeChat Pay and Alipay, which is like a digital wrapper around the RMB. But we'll see. I mean, it'd be interesting to watch and see if any country right now, like in the next year or so, that does try to issue a new currency can succeed in doing so, because I think Bitcoin has reached enough market saturation and the infrastructure around it, like wallets and everything, are at the point at which it could just take over.
Yeah. I'm lucky enough to have had some experience with my grandparents who were, quite a lot older, and because we lived in different countries, I did get to experience them for a little bit, and some of my aunties and whatever. And there's a culture of saving amongst Turkish women in gold, in jewelry, in cash as well. And but the gold is their base layer, right? Yeah. That's like, if everything falls apart, we still have our gold. And I hope people start to see Bitcoin in that way. It's like, it's that base layer for you, and then anyone you need to pay for whatever reason, you can choose how they want to receive it, right? And I'd love to see that actually become a reality, where your backstop is your cold storage hardware wallet somewhere, right? And then you have a hot wallet and you're like, man, I don't care how I pay you. If it's local currency, US dollar, like a stable coin or whichever fiat currency, I don't care about that. You just tell me, it's no problem, bro. It's just pressing buttons, right? I'd love to see it to get to that stage of usability and frictionless user experience as well.
I think we'll get there.
You think so?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're going to need more people who are sympathetic to the needs of the masses. And at the moment, what we still have is idolizing early stage cypherpunk law. And I think that's really good, because the ethics and the principles from that era are critical to Bitcoin. Like, they need to survive. But I think some of the other things around that, like, you know, treating people like idiots if they can't, or if they find it intimidating to self-custody with the current user, I think that's counterproductive. I think we have to meet people. We have to devise new ways to make it easier for people to do that. Yeah. And people, there are people I respect, by the way, who say these things. I'm like, no, bro, come on, you've got to, like, we have to feel that collective pressure to make things better. Mm-hmm. And at the moment, I don't think we do. And so we're getting a lot of half-baked, I want to be careful with what I say, less than optimal solutions from much larger companies. Yeah. And the more we leave that space open for them to play, when the Apples and the Googles come, and what they'll end up doing is creating these really easy to use solutions with none of the assurances or the implementations of the cypherpunk ethics and values of security, decentralization, self-custody. They will just be like, hey, this is just really easy to use, trust us. Yeah. And I think that's going to be a big loss if we allow that to happen and just wait for bigger players to take over.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot we can do, and we just have to have the mindset that we can make it better.
All right. Samson, I really appreciate you coming and visiting us in Prague. It's been a great pleasure to talk to you again. I interviewed you once before, I don't know if you recall.
On Spaces.
I think we were on Spaces, yeah, and I really enjoyed that chat. And so I'm glad that we could follow this up with an equally enjoyable chat as well. So thank you so much, man.
Yeah, thank you, and good to do in person.
Yeah, can't wait till next time.
Sounds great.
All right, that's a wrap.